Right, we've got the swing arm off the bike. I'm going to be making a jig up, bracing it all in the right places. Then what I'm going to do is I'll cut it off. This side will get cut off, should I say, but it'll be cut off like across here, with leaving that stub sticking out. It'll get cut off across there, so then the whole side will just come out, and then all this bit will be cut off, a new piece. I've got the, just going to turn this screen a bit. I'll have to cut a bit of this steel that you can see just there. That's to cut and bend to fit in when I've made it wider. Now I've also made a new axle, which is do you know where the old one is actually? The axle's obviously an inch wider than the old one. I think that's the old one there. Yeah, so as you can see there, it's actually an inch longer. The new one's an inch longer than the old one. Made a new spacer for the disc. Got the shoulder on that'll sit into the disc. Still to drill at the minute, but I've got centre pops that match them holes, so I can put a centre pop in them and then drill them. And it's also beveled out in the back, recessed in the back to allow it to fit onto the wheel, because the wheel has the same thing as that on it, so that'll sit onto there. It all fits, I've already tried it. So that's the 10mm spacer for the disc. That's obviously the bracket for the caliper, but I've made some new spacers for that. That's the one that'll go up against the bearing. It's got just a little raised bit on it, so it sits against the bearing in a race, not the outer race. And then a new outer spacer which sits into there, so that gives me the space required, the right spacing required to space all that out. Also got some new disc bolts, obviously longer because of the spacer. And I've got some new discs. I've got a pair. Now my mate runs a set of these on his, so then he says they're absolutely spot on. So I've got a pair of them. I think that's the front one actually. No, it's the back one. Yeah, so that's the new disc that'll be going on, and I've got another one exactly the same for the front. So it'll be a matching pair still. So things have been moving on in the background, but what I'm going to do, I'll knock you off again, and I'll, as I say, I'll get all this jigged up. I've got loads of bits of offcuts kicking about, so I'm just going to go over the top with this jig because I don't want it to go out of square. I want it so that when I put this side back on, it's exactly where it is now, but just an inch wider. So the jig will be a bit OTT, but that doesn't matter because it's all just offcuts of steel anyways. So once I've made the jig up, I'll come back, show it all set up and what the crack's going to be, and then we'll start cutting this thing to bits. Right, knock you off for now, back soon. Right, podgy jig made, but it's sturdy, that's all that matters. It's, as I've explained already, it's a sacrificial jig. Once I've welded this side back on, well, I haven't even cut it off yet obviously, but once it's welded back on, the jig will just be cut out. It's welded to the swing arm on this side. This side isn't getting modified. It's braced crossways that way and from here to the back end of the swing arm, so it can't twist or move anywhere when I cut this. I've sacrificed 2 bits of axle shaft material. It doesn't matter, I've got loads anyways. And as you can see, there's a gap there between the two, and they're up tight against each end of the swing arm, the oval where your axle sits. That's all tied in the middle at the end. So basically, when I cut this off here and down at the bottom, that whole side will slide off. Then what I'll be doing is I'll be dropping all these bits of, all 4 of these are 1 inch. Now they've all been cut off the same piece, so when I put them together, when I put it in, they'll all be equal. So I'll put them in as my inch spacers, and then clamp, once I've cut it off obviously, one there, one underneath, clamp it together, one in here, one in the bottom, clamp it back up, then I can weld all this back together. So, but for now, the jig's done. It's these clamps here, obviously I can't get in and weld the back side of the angle, so the angle's welded at this side and the clamp's there to keep it flat against this on both ends. Otherwise it would try and lift because of the weld. So, but as I say, the jig, it's a bodgy looking thing, but it's going to do what I want it to do, and that's all that matters. So for now, I'm going to call it a day, because I'm going to be going out, so not do any more yet. But tomorrow I'll come back in, I'll cut the swing arm side, like top and bottom, and then lift that side off. But before I cut it, I will be taking a couple of measurements in certain places, just so that when it does all go back together, I can measure it again and make sure that each point where I've measured it is 1 inch wider, not like a millimetre out one way or the other. So, but I'll do that tomorrow. So for now, that's it. Catch you later. Right, it's the next day. I've cut the side off, I put a bracing piece across, just tacked it on, so it all sort of goes on. It's a tight fit. Tap it in with a nylon hammer. Yeah, so I've cut it off, obviously, cleaned up the areas where it's going to be welded, put my spacers in, etc. And then I've had the swing arm back on and clamped in place, checked all the measurements, and the measurements are absolutely bang on, exactly 25mm wider in all measurements, which is spot on. Anyways, while I had it put on, as in while I had that back on, I cut my bit of steel that I showed you in one of the earlier videos. It was actually covered up by the discs, but I've cut a piece of that, measured all this up. Now this isn't sat on properly, but I've cut and bent a new piece which will go in on there. When it's all banged down in place, it all fits nice. So, but what I'm going to do is I will get this put back in place with the spacers in and clamped in place again. Get that into position and then tack it all on this part of the swing arm and then take this back off, because what I'm going to do before I tack the whole thing together is I'm going to fully weld across this bit here, because with the weld going on there, just lift this camera up a touch. Yeah, with the weld going across here, it'll have a tendency to pull this piece up the way with the heat on that side. So once I've welded across there, I'll get that back to its shape, you know, so it's like fits back in this part properly, and then I'll tack the other bit in down the bottom here. And once I've got it all tacked together, I'll come back and show you it all tacked up with the spacers in, etc. And then we'll just get cracked on and get it welded up. So yeah, as I say, got this all apart, cleaned up the bits that are going to be welded, etc. So I'll get it put back together, get that tacked in place, as I say, get it lined up properly first, get it tacked in place. I think I just need to take a little bit more. It's just slightly catching the weld on the back of here, so I just need to take a little bit more off the back of this part so it sits in properly. Yeah, can't remember where I was now. Right, as I say, I'll put this half of the swing arm back on, clamped down with its spacers on, etc. Double check the measurements again before I do anything. Then I'll tack that in place on this end, as I say. Then I'll remove this half again and I'll fully weld across this bit, and then test fit it again, see how far out it is, and because this will pull. Now this is 1/2 inch thick, this bar, but it'll still pull. It might only pull a tiny bit, but it'll pull. So when I've got it welded, I'll just tap it back to shape, then I can put the rest back on, tack it all fully in place. Well, I'm pointing up here, there's nothing to weld up here, but tack all this bit back on properly and then just fully weld it. But once I've got it all tacked in place, I'll come back then. So, right, catch you later. Right, I've welded all this bit up, it's fully welded all the way around. I decided to weld all the back and down the sides, top and bottom, before I welded that bit. Reason being, it sort of preheats all that bit of steel and then it pulls less. So I then welded that bit last. Let it cool down a bit, because obviously as it cools, that's when it starts to pull. Got it to where, you know, you can put your hand on it without burning your hand. Made sure it was still where I wanted it, which it was, thankfully. Now I've put the side back on with the spacers in, clamped in with the clamps on, tacked the bit on the bottom. Now the bit on the bottom I'll explain after I've welded it all, as to what I'm going to do with it, to tidy it up, that is. So I've got this bit here where that bent bit welds to the actual side of the swing arm that was cut off, that's to fully weld, and this whole bottom bit is all to fully weld. So what I'll do is I'll zoom you out and I'll make a start. and we'll get the job done. Rather than letting you watch all the welding, I'll probably, when I get this onto the computer, I'll probably make a section where it's fast forwarded, so this will be like welded in super quick time, whereas in reality it'll take me ages. Oh. I'll try not to watch the video too much. Also, I don't know how this camera is going to react to a weld, so it might go black, if you know what I mean. You know how it reacts to light when I've done like light tests on bikes, different headlights and stuff. So we'll see how it goes anyways. That's sort of a root run as well. I'll be putting a capping run over the top of that because it's where the flat plate is meeting the round bar, so it'll get another run over the top. Right, I've just dipped my tip, so I'm going to sharpen it. I'll just knock it off for now and I'll come back in a second. Right, back to it. Right, just knock you off. Right, back again. Telephones are a pain in the ass. Oh. Right, that's that welded. So now we'll just let it cool down. I won't touch it at all until it's cold. And then I'll check all my measurements. Then I'll take the clamps off, check measurements again. Obviously I'll bring you back when it's cold. And and then we'll cut the jig out and then check the measurements again, and if it needs a tap here and there then obviously it'll get it. But for now I'll knock you off and we'll come back later.